We're featuring Ava Dennis, a college softball player with cystic fibrosis. Outside of athletics and academics, Ava works to raise awareness and fight for a cure. Ava, we are excited to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ava, can you tell us about yourself outside of dealing with cystic fibrosis?
Well, I am a pre-physical therapy major. I plan on getting my doctorate in physical therapy here at Hardin-Simmons University. I have about 2 years of undergraduate left and about 2.5 years of graduate school left before I really get into my field. And I currently do a lot on campus. We're a small Division III school, so that allows me to do more things outside of softball, which is a huge blessing in my life. I work with Parkinson's patients almost every day. I love it, absolutely love it. I connect with them a lot more than the normal college student because they also have a chronic disorder that is just going to continuously get worse throughout their lives. And I have the same thing. They love that story about me, and I love working with them. I also work on campus, which is really nice. Really, besides that, that's all I'm up to, studying and playing softball.
That's really remarkable. It's just really special anytime folks in college are spending the time to serve the community and be with others. So I just definitely want to commend you on that. I know I didn't play uh, college athletics just recreationally, but just having friends who did. I know how much time it is to be a student athlete. So how do you manage all of those commitments that you just laid out for us? Like what's your secret to making sure that you're staying on top of everything?
I'm a morning person. I do think a big part of my success is I practice sports in the afternoon. I reserve my whole afternoon for softball and working on myself and my craft. But the mornings I get up and I go to work and then I do all my commitments in my classes early in the morning. I wouldn't want to say get them out of the way because I love doing them. But once I get done with them, I can just shut off that part of my brain and then I can just move on to the softball. I also chronically live by my calendar.
I hear that and respect that for sure. I'm almost so scared about like how committed to the calendar we are because if it's not there, I know for me, if it's not on the calendar, I forget it's even happening.
But yeah, it takes a lot, but once you get used to it, it's actually really nice. I love it.
Ava, you've had CF since you were born. How did it affect you growing up?
Cystic fibrosis really affected me growing up. I didn't realize it at the time because my parents were amazing in the process. I was diagnosed at birth when they did a genetic test on me. And it kind of shocked my parents for sure, but their one goal in my childhood was to make sure I live a normal childhood. Although it wasn't normal, I was taking regular medications and fighting battles that most children would have no idea what that was. But my parents did their best to keep me in school, keep me in athletics, let me go be a child throughout all of it. And when I was younger, I didn't even know that my childhood was completely different from other children because they did so amazing. But now that I look back at it, I realized that it was not normal at all. And there was a lot of challenges I faced, such as like regular hospital visits, medication, so much I would do in the morning that most children would not do. It was very, very different. And I think it did impact my family a little bit because my siblings were like, oh, Ava's going to go do her treatments and it takes about 30 minutes to an hour to do those treatments. Like it wasn't normal at all. But I think my parents did their best to keep ahead of it and make me feel normal. And I think for anyone who has a child with any disease, that should be your goal. Yes, you want the best for your child, you want the best for their health and to keep them alive, but they're also children too. I think that's very
Absolutely, absolutely. So amazed at you're talking and saying like you didn't feel like an unusual childhood. So were you sort of starting to show interest in sports as a child, and if so, like how did you manage that while dealing with the effects of cystic fibrosis as well as the treatment that you needed?
I always showed us interest in athletics. I loved to run. I loved to be with a group of people. I also grew up in a really small town. So that was all you could do was play sports. Everyone played sports. So I wanted to be a part of everyone. And My parents did amazing. And my dad was like, coached me in softball and put the teams together. He did amazing at that. But I will say balancing it in physical activity and cystic fibrosis was pretty difficult. I did see a correlation with how much physical activity I was doing compared to how well I was doing in like my lung function tests and such as that. I will say staying consistently active in my childhood did help my cystic fibrosis significantly. And I feel that way with a lot of health issues can be helped with a physical activity. Also, we need medicine, of course. But I really do love how much it helped my cystic fibrosis, especially now. I feel like a better person because of that. Now, of course, I did struggle during sports. Like, if I was in a low with my cystic fibrosis, I would have to always have my inhaler, or I would have to stop and go do a treatment. Or even if I would go a little crazy in gym class and I would end up going to my nurse, and my nurse would have to give me a breathing treatment or such. But besides that, my parents did a very good job of making me feel normal because we are people.
Absolutely.
It's very hard whenever you get sick in any disease to maintain a normal lifestyle.
Well said.
I definitely had a hard time when I was doing my morning routine of medicine and stuff. We have these like vest things that were strapped to our chest, and it shakes us very violently to break up the mucus in our lungs. And when I was doing that and my siblings were just getting ready for school and didn't really have to do anything, they were over at the table eating breakfast. And I was like, why am I different? And that was a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. And I don't think I wrapped my head around that why until around middle school. And I think what helped is whenever I went into school, I just acted like every other kid.
Yeah.
You can't just isolate yourself. Isolating yourself and thinking all the time, oh, I'm different. I can't do this. I can't, but you can.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit more work, but you can.
Ava, I've been really amazed at how wonderful kids can be to each other, just the sort of kindness that they can show without any adult prompting them. What was your experience with your classmates and even your teammates, as you were dealing with the challenges of it? And as you're still, as you were mentioning, just wanting to be normal and just be another one of the kids, how was their sort of like treatment of you and disposition toward you, particularly like in athletics, but just in general with school? As you were dealing with the struggles and the challenges of cystic fibrosis.
It was interesting for sure because I wasn't very open about my cystic fibrosis. My parents were very like, we're not going to tell other people because we don't want them to look at me differently. I have gotten so much better at that, but the transition that I had between not talking about my cystic fibrosis to beginning to tell my teammates and my coaches was very different for me. I was very scared about telling people, and it's okay to be scared because you don't want people to look at you differently. But once I told them, they were very like, you're amazing. We're proud of you. You've done so much more to get here, and we love it. And my teammates, even here in college, have been so supportive of my cystic fibrosis journey. Very supportive. I think the hardest part is being open to telling people that, yeah, I do have an issue, but I'm still a person.
Of course. Of course. Right.
How did you start to let people know about your problems?
I was thinking about that. I was like, I don't know if like I was a school teacher when lupus started to manifest itself, and so it was such a public thing that I wanted to hide it. Like everything you're saying about how you just wanted to like throw it in the bag or just like be a normal person, like simpatico. But like I really didn't think I had a chance to because I had to explain why I wasn't at work. And I was like, "Oh, you're in the hospital? What's going on?" Like, I can't be like, "Oh, it's nothing." Like, it's clearly something. And so I think my trajectory was I was just like really open with people initially. Like, if someone asked me how you're doing, they would get like almost like details of a lab report, just like that kind of specificity. And then I retreated in myself after and just was like, I really don't want to talk about this. I don't like how, everything that your parents were saying. Like I felt like I got that experience of, hey, take it easy. No, you don't want to do it. I was like, I still want to be a person. I was in my early 20s when it happened. So I felt like I was being viewed absolutely through the lens of my illness rather than my humanity. So I just didn't even want to deal with it at all. And eventually, when I had my second flare, I was at a different job, and then I was able to talk about it, but I was older and more mature and had a different perspective, a more nurtured perspective, and that allowed me to, especially as I was recovering, people were like, oh, like you're back, like you seem like yourself again. And it allowed me to be a person who has this thing going on rather than like, some sort of charity case, a person who can't be a good teammate.
I will say, if you get good people around you that genuinely love and care about you, they aren't going to see you for your disease, or they'll see you for yourself and be there to support you. I think it's a very hard line. Like, yeah, I'm not going to tell every stranger that I meet about my disease, but also the people closest to me should know what's kind of going on in the back. It's a hard question because I do think in high school, when I was in the middle phase of like trying to tell people more about my cystic fibrosis, but I'm also trying to go play college sports. And when you're in the recruitment process, this is for anyone that has a disease and is trying to go play at the next level in college or even beyond that, you don't want to tell coaches and the people around you what is going on. Because my biggest fear was my coach is going to find out I have a chronic illness and see me as a liability. So I was extremely scared to tell my coach about my disease. I even waited until after I signed at the college to tell them about it because I knew in my heart that it was not going to hold me back. Although sometimes it does happen that some people come to college and they do have a flare up or they have an issue. That's okay, but my biggest fear was I do have a flare up. I do get hospitalized, and my coach just sees me as unfit to be a college athlete or even a college student. And that was probably my biggest fear. And it still kind of is. But you need to believe that it's okay. No matter what, you're going to be okay. Life goes on.
Yeah, indeed. What is your strategy or like, habits? Like we talked about waking up early in the morning, but what are the things you do to sort of like manage yourself and take care of yourself? Like I'm imagining you sound like a very disciplined person with your time, but sort of what are those things that help you, recover after a game, recover from a practice, all that sort of thing?
I will say being on top of your medicine is so important. Some people miss a day, or it doesn't happen much in the cystic fibrosis community, but sometimes you get tired of being sick because you're constantly sick, pretty much. And you're like, well, I forget to take my medicine, or oh, I don't need to take my medicine for one day. It's like, no, it'll build up. And my biggest thing is always taking my medicine, even if I'm having difficulties with insurance. I still try to find like a supplement, cheap medicine that I can get, which is very hard. I understand that sometimes, but staying on medicine and definitely getting enough sleep. College students are really bad about that. And I bet everyone's been through it. 7 to 8 hours minimum, because our bodies are constantly healing from the constant damage they're going through. So you need to give yourself the proper nutrition and rest to fully recover, especially if I'm working out. I have to.
Yeah. Well said. It's so hard to adhere to when you're in college. Like, when you were talking earlier about being a morning person, I thought about how I was a morning and evening person. Like I was both an early bird and a night owl. So I just did not sleep. I just was up all the time. And how much exactly what you're saying is true. You have to allow your body to recover, and sleeping is the best form of that.
College sports. It Whenever you're young, pretty much the doctors tell your parents that they're never going to be able to be very physically active and they're going to struggle to breathe. And when you think struggle to breathe, you're like, they can't do much. Like you can't do cardio, you can't run. All of it takes your lungs. And that kind of broke my parents, and them keeping me in sports was very brave of them, for sure. 'Cause that's kind of scary to put your chronically diseased kid in something that they're not really supposed to be doing. But college sports was always a dream of mine. It's every little softball player's dream. But it was like less likely for it to happen for me. Like it felt like a stick beating me down. Like, but now that I'm here and I'm in college, it feels like I did it. I accomplished what not only every softball player wants to do, but also with cystic fibrosis. That is very important. Very, very important.
Reaching the collegiate level, which only 7% of student athletes do, I can imagine how much significantly lower it is for athletes with CF. How has achieving that milestone influenced your life today?
I don't let any opportunities go by ever. And that might be why I am very busy all the time. But I promise it's almost always worth it. If you take your opportunity, take what's put on your plate. It's just such a big deal. And whenever you're younger, you don't realize that. But now I strive to be like, you want me to volunteer? I'm doing it. Or, oh, you want me to take this internship? I'm doing it. You want me to come on this podcast? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it to the best I can.
Gotcha. You really sound like, the mantra we've been talking about on the show, unstoppable. You're describing it, and it just sounds like, and I'll ask you this, like, how has, you talked about being able to be a college athlete in spite of what it looked like, earlier in your childhood. Like, how has that affected the way that you view yourself? Like, when you do face challenges, outside of health, because of what you've been able to overcome and continue to succeed with in spite of CF. Like, how does that sort of shape your perspective when you're facing just the ordinary challenges of college life, like midterms, finals, and internships, all that good stuff?
I think I'm not the strongest. I'm not the smartest. I might not be the best person for this job, or I might not be the smartest in this class. But if I put my everything into studying for this exam or this practice that I don't feel like going to, or even the study groups, it's the small things. If I put my everything in, then I shouldn't feel any regrets. And that is such a big thing that I strive to do in my life is if I do everything I can and everything I do, I'm not going to regret a bad grade. Or if I bomb an exam, it's like, okay, I studied weeks for this exam and like maybe there was another reason why I bombed it. Maybe I was stressed about something else. But when you have these challenges, you don't want to go through them and then regret what you just did. Because if you put everything in, there's absolutely no way to regret what you just did.
Yeah, yeah, that.
I love your all in go get it attitude. I so appreciate that. As someone who doesn't know a lot about CF, what's something you wish more people understood about your challenges or your journey?
When you think cystic fibrosis, you think about the lungs, which is true. Like that's where majority of us struggle. But it's a complete body disease. All of your whole body is going through issues. We have hydration issues, which is big for sports. We can have diabetes related to cystic fibrosis. We can have liver problems. There's just so much more to cystic fibrosis than your lungs are sticky. We get mutations and we can't, if you ever watched the movie 5 Feet Apart, we can't come in within 6 feet of each other. And that was very weird in high school because I did go to school with another girl with cystic fibrosis. And it was a small school, like the hallways were exactly 6 feet apart. Like it was very hard to navigate that. And it's more than just, oh, my lungs are bad. It's more than, oh, I just can't breathe sometimes. We are doing an insane amount of tests and taking an insane amount of medicine because cystic fibrosis affects so many different parts of the body. And that's really how a lot of chronic disorders are. And that's why they're so confusing to navigate.
Right.
With it affecting more than your lungs and your day to day, or there are times when you're simply just over all of it? And if so, how do you get through those times?
Yeah.
I will say that does happen sometimes. I look at my pile of medicine in my hands and I'm like, wow, this is a lot. But you have to just take it and keep going. I take the medicine and then you think about the next thing you do that day, or you think about something you're excited for that day. Taking it one day at a time whenever everything gets overwhelming. When you get out of that doctor visit and they're like, oh, you have this new bacteria in your lungs. It's like, well, I do, and I'm going to have to tackle this issue, but also I have this, and this to do, and it's very easily to get overwhelmed. So what I have to do personally, it might not work for everyone, is I have to take my little calendar, I have to look at my singular day. And it's like, if I can get through this day, the next day I can get through, and I can get through it all. And you just chip away at this big, almost like mountain of a problem that's almost never ending. If you just chip away at it, everything will be okay. Everything will line itself up because you have the people around you, have the doctors, you have this support system. It will all fall in.
Ava, I wanted to circle back on the movie you mentioned, 5 Feet Apart. Can you share more about that?
Yes, it's actually a really good movie in general, but
Okay.
it shows the daily life of a really sick person with cystic fibrosis kind of hospitalized. It has a great storyline, but it also shows the little details of our disease, and that's why it's so important. It also shows how hard it is to be a community with cystic fibrosis because we can't touch each other, we can't be near each other. You can't have a convention of people with cystic fibrosis. It was even hard to go watch this movie because you don't know who has cystic fibrosis in the movie theater. So, because there's no physical way to see someone has cystic fibrosis. And so, staying 6 feet apart is super important because we can transfer bacteria to each other that can
Okay.
that's the reason why we have to stay 6 feet apart. Just like with
Gotcha.
COVID, we can transmit COVID up to 6 feet away.
Right.
So we have to stay 6 feet apart to make sure we don't get any bacterias, or because one person with cystic fibrosis can have contracted one bacteria and you don't want to give it to another person with CF. That would not be fun for anyone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then I think about just, how germy people in general are, right? Like, I have kids in school and every September they come home with a whole bunch of souvenirs. Like, so how does school work in general then? Like, it's because, I'm thinking about like cold and flu season. That must be a dangerous time as well, right?
Yes, cold and flu, COVID was super scary.
Of course.
Extremely, yeah, that's with anyone with an underlying chronic disorder. But really, it's just staying on top of my vitamins. If you have those vitamins to build your immune system should at least try to support itself. And
For
if you
sure.
get sick, you get sick. It happens. Everyone gets sick. Of course, ours is a little different, but you get through it. And
Yeah.
staying on top of my vitamins for sure is how I handle school and hand washing.
What I hadn't seen this Netflix movie, but I definitely want to. I can't remember the name of the documentary I'd seen years ago about a young. I want to say she was a British girl who had CF, and I just remember her parents having to like massage her and just like pat her on the back to try to like break up some of the harder mucus in that way. And I bring that up to say like how able are you to sort of like live independently? Is it something where, if you have like a roommate, you have to kind of tell them like, hey, here's what I might need you to do? Or is it something where you're able to just sort of assist yourself in case of, you're sick or some sort of difficult situation going on?
I'm very much able to do all my treatments on my own. Ever since that back padding technique, we've created the vest, which is what I was telling you about earlier that shakes us. That
Great. Okay.
is very nice. So you just strap it on, it can break up that hard mucus. And then
Yeah.
all of our treatments are really, you can do them all by yourself. Of course, when someone's younger, they're not going to know how to set up the treatment, of course. But as you get older, it becomes almost second nature. And it's been especially hard with college because I can't just go back to my cystic fibrosis specialist all the time because they're about 2.5 hours away from me. So I really have to stay on top of my medicine. If I get extremely sick, I cannot just go all the way to Fort Worth, Texas to do all these tests. Like that's just not something I can do while I'm playing softball and doing school.
Hmm.
So really these self tests that I can do on myself are really important, but staying on top of them is really important because I can't just travel
Yeah.
across Texas.
Makes sense.
When you get sick, it can be from like you can get bronchitis or pneumonia. I have problems with pneumonia. That happens to me a lot. It can last from 2 weeks to
Yeah.
months to some people even are in the hospital for years because it
Yeah.
gets so bad. So yeah, it when the that parts come, they hit you, and it's hard to get through those times for sure. Insurance has been an issue. They don't want to pay for any rare chronic disorders or any rare medications because it's expensive. What has helped me the most, especially making sure I take my medicine, is I have this pill box. I put it right next to where I can see it every morning, every night. Because I'm an out of sight, out of mind person. If it is not right in front of my face, I'm not going to do it. Hence the calendar.
Understand?
That has been very helpful, and it's very helpful to take a pill box to out of like traveling for softball. That is very helpful. With insurance, oh yeah. If the insurance gets behind on medicine, it can take weeks to just battle with insurance. Hours on the hours that I as a college student don't have, and I couldn't even imagine an adult with a full-time job. I really tried to hop on it early. Like if I get about halfway through my medicine, I'm like, okay, start the process now in case something bad happens. But also if something bad does happen and I don't get my medicine for like a month, I always have a little bit left over from a last treatment that I didn't quite finish out because my medicine came early or I was able to save some of it for some reason. I am able to use that. So having a little bit of extra medicine, I know it's like expensive and kind of sucks and it's not something you can do all the time, but if the something you don't want to happens, you're able to have backups and stay on track.
Sure, for sure. What would you want other folks who live with CF and are watching this and are listening to you? What would you want them to know? Like, what sort of like word of encouragement do you wish someone gave you at the beginning that you were not able to give someone else?
Wish I wasn't so scared to tell people about my issue or my cystic fibrosis because I hid it for a long time. I was very insecure about it. And I bet the same thing happens with an autoimmune disorder. It's not something you want to talk about, but we highlight very largely in the Boomer Esiason Foundation that your support system matters. Because if you get into a deep, dark place, you have to have people there to support you. You can't do everything alone. As much as we want to do everything alone, it's not possible. Having those people around you, those doctors, the correct coaches, the correct teammates, the correct friends, it's big. It's really big.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Ava, you're a huge advocate for cystic fibrosis. Can you tell us about the foundation you work with?
So I work with the Boomer Esiason Foundation, and they raise money and awareness for cystic fibrosis. And I am on a name, image, and likeness deal with them. So I show my story on social media, was very good for me because I was really bad about telling people about my cystic fibrosis. So this has really brought me out of my shell. But we do a ton of raising money. We have like a Breathe Week where we raise a bunch of money to go towards finding, hopefully one day, a cure. But right now it's just developing drugs to help with cystic fibrosis. I do a lot of raising money and a lot of just telling people what happens behind the scenes because no one really knows. We look like normal people. I wouldn't say most chronic diseases, but a lot of our chronic diseases it's below the surface and you can't tell what we're going through every day or what our bodies are going through, how we feel. So just showing that and having a community around cystic fibrosis because you do need that support system and you need to know what else is going on. How are other people battling the illness? It's very helpful, and I love being a part of this foundation. Love it. Thank you.
Incredibly important work you do on top of being a student, an athlete, a friend, all of it. Hearing about your ambition and love for life has just been an absolute joy. To our community, thank you for joining us. Please share this episode with a friend. We're all in this together. Peace.